Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us here at Driven 2021 today. Welcome to today's episode featuring Labcorp. Before I hand things off to David Steely, I want to encourage you to use our chat feature to ask any questions that may arise during our interview with Lon from Labcorp. At the end of today's interview, David and Lon will be answering questions live in the chat. Also in the chat, I have placed a link to register for the live raffle of the Beats AirPods today. It's important that you use your work email when registering for the raffle, as we must comply with corporate and government guidelines. With all that being said, I'm really excited to kick things off with BP3's David Steely and Labcorp's Lon Swain.
All right, thank you, Julia. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm David Steely, and I'm excited to introduce you to Labcorp's Senior Project Manager, Lon Swain. Thank you for taking the time to sit down and talk with me today, Lon. I'm really excited to hear about the things you have been working on today.
My pleasure.
All right, to start out, why don't you tell us a little bit about Labcorp and what you all do?
Sure. I think a lot of people are familiar with the Labcorp name. Anytime you might need a blood panel for an annual physical, or a COVID test, or perhaps a drug panel as a pre-employment screening, Labcorp has offices all over the country where we can do a blood draw, do a urine sample, and do those types of tests. Since late 2014, the company I initially joined, Covance, was acquired by Labcorp. And so now we are officially known as Labcorp Drug Development, a separate wing. The one I just described, the parent sort of company, is Labcorp Diagnostics. So on the drug development side, we manage clinical trials for drugs that are being tested for FDA approval. Primarily, we are the largest contract research organization, I think, in the industry. And so we have very high volumes of, lab processing, kit shipments, working with sites on getting the clinical trials processed and keep them going efficiently, and maintaining the data that ultimately has to be submitted to the FDA for approval.
All right, thank you. Now, since we're talking about automation today, can you tell us what led Labcorp to think about automation?
So about three and a half years ago, there was an initiative within the enterprise called Launchpad. And Launchpad's goal was to look at processes across the organization to see where they could be made more efficient, more effective, less error prone. And automation was kind of one small piece within that larger Launchpad effort. And that's where it was introduced to the company.
All right. And so with drug development being part of the critical business and one of the areas that you've automated within Labcorp, what did you see there that could be automated?
So initially, there were a series of executive level meetings where they looked at drug development processes business by business unit, trying to identify the ones that had the highest opportunity in terms of return on investment, the most people doing them, the biggest bang for the buck, if you will. Our initial automation effort started with 3 fairly significant and complex processes that ultimately we automated, though there were challenges, but we got through them. We'll talk perhaps later about how maybe we would take a different approach, knowing what we know today, but that's essentially the approach. Once we identified those high-level processes, we then drilled down, talked to managers and users. Obviously, if you're going to automate a process, you have to have an intimate understanding, at the keystroke level of what's going on. And so we narrowed down the executive choices to the three I talked about, and those became kind of our automation kickoff, if you will.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for that. If you were getting started with RPA again today, what would you tell yourself?
Well, as I alluded to, one of the first things I would tell myself and try to tell those who are organizing the effort is that we really need to dip our toe in the water a little more gently than we did. We bit off some extremely large, extremely complex processes with a lot of moving parts. And we had some real challenges getting those in place initially. I would also spend a lot more time aligning with our IT organization to make sure we understand, mutually understand, kind of where the IT line stops and the automation line starts. We operate very much in a gray area sometimes, where traditionally you have a clear-cut line between the business does this and IT does that, and it's not at all uncommon in my experience for automation to kind of overlap. And so having a clear understanding with IT of what you need from them, what they can expect from you, I think having that established keeps those types of things from interfering from what you're actually trying to do, which is get automations in place and save people time. Yes, and that's the quick win concept is something we are definitely big believers in as well. Absolutely. It definitely helps spread the word around the organization about automation and those benefits, and you can actually see it. Well, are you currently seeing the ROI that you had hoped for from automation? Generally speaking, yes. And I'm sure anybody who's done this knows you can estimate, all you want, but then the reality of it can be somewhat different. For example, when we go through our process, we talk to the business users about, on average, how long does it take a person doing this task manually to get through the process and from beginning to end. And let's say the answer is 5 minutes. I think one of the mistakes we made is we go, okay, it's 5 minutes of time if they do the process once. If they work 8 hours, they can do 96 transactions. So if the bot does 96 transactions, we've basically done a full-time equivalent for that days of work. But in reality, that person doesn't do 96, right? Because that person has somebody swing by their desk and start a conversation, or that person has to take a break, or what have you. So maybe the real number on average is 80. So sometimes you can undercount your productivity. Other times, people who are very anxious to get an automation in place might overestimate the number of transactions that they think will be done. And so you go in with an idea of they're going to feed us 800 a day. And when you look at the numbers after the bot's been in production a month, 2 months, 3 months, you're like, it's more like 600. But the fantastic thing about automation is we have those numbers. We don't have to guess. We don't have to rely on someone saying it feels like we did this much. We can state factually, we successfully processed X number of transactions every day, week, month.
That's great. Then you can always go back and compare to what your estimates were and see what some of those real numbers are.
Exactly.
Great point. That is a great point. Thank you. So maybe not specifically speaking, but what are your future plans for automations?
So we sort of actively solicit within the organization. We do some things with some email. We do a monthly "what can RPA do for you" type of session with just a general invite for people who want to drop in, and we do a little presentation to try and give them an idea. You can't expect, especially in a large organization, that everyone out there doing their job has an understanding of what RPA is and how it works, and some of the things that are required in terms, at least in our case, of structured data, high volume, those sort of things. So having that little session, it, on the one hand, keeps your, I don't want to call them bad submissions, but people will submit an idea and you can look very quickly and go, no, that's not something we can do. And, you hate to go back to someone and say, great idea, but we can't do it. So we try to educate them, what a good opportunity looks like. And that raises the quality of the submissions that we get. And it also gets the word out there that, hey, you might be able to take advantage of this. And so we have a pretty good pipeline to date using that type of outreach, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
And yeah, so, moving forward, we have, it seems like we always have 6 to 10 opportunities that we're closely evaluating, and we do have a structured evaluation process where we look on the one hand at the ROI and the amount of time returned to the business, and on the other hand, the technical aspects of how difficult it will be to develop, how difficult will it be to maintain and support, and then mash those scores together and do a little magic quadrant to sort of as objectively as possible make the best choices for where we're using our development capacity.
Oh, that's a great point, Lon. And I really like the point around identifying good versus sort of not so good automation opportunities. Sometimes you might see, it sounds like you're seeing that people come and say, I really don't like to do this as part of my job. Can we automate this? And that may not necessarily be the best opportunity.
Right. And again, too, you always want people to be positive about it. Right. And if you have to send the bad news too often, my concern is, word of mouth. Well, yeah, I submitted an automation. They told me I couldn't do it. That doesn't mean the guy next to him might not have one of the best opportunities around. Right. So we want to keep it positive, want to keep the message out there that this can be a really great thing if you just keep these 5 or 6 important things in mind before you submit the idea. Right.
No, that's great information. Okay, so with 2022 fast approaching, what do you hope that Labcorp will be telling us at Driven 2022 about what you've done with automation?
Well, hopefully if I'm sitting in the same chair this time next year, I'll be telling you about kind of the AI tools that we were able to bring to bear and kind of, improve our ability to handle some of those things I was just talking about, where maybe their data isn't structured, but we have a machine learning solution that can help us recognize the data that comes in via email, because we've taught the machine to pick out the data points that we need, to enter into an application, as an example. Akin to that as well, natural language processing. Tools like this, I think, will help us expand the pool of good candidate automations or processes for automation that we could tackle.
Yes, and hopefully some of those are also extending the width, I guess, or the additional parts of the processes that maybe RPA is not quite suited for.
Right. Well, and that's a great point. We started as, purely a central labs focused sort of group. And in the last few months, I think because we've had some successes, we've had other business units and at the corporate level express interest in what I think are probably the more typical automation opportunities on the finance side, processing invoices, purchase orders. And so I'm excited about the prospect of kind of when you talk about increasing your footprint sort of laterally like that. I think that's something I hope to be telling you successful stories about next year as well.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Lon. I really appreciate you sitting down with us and sharing such great information. Viewers, please stay tuned as we transition into the live Q&A portion, and be on the lookout for that link in the chat box to enter our Beats noise canceling earphones raffle. Due to the nature of the raffle, you must register with your work email to be included.
Okay, we can go ahead and start the live Q&A if David and Lon want to go ahead and get on camera. Take it away, David.
All right. Thank you, Julia. Lon, could you tell us a little bit more about Launchpad?
Sure. Like I said in the video, Launchpad was an enterprise level effort to basically look at everything process wise that we might be able to do better, more efficiently, more cost effectively, with fewer errors. So there are, in addition to RPA, which is my little piece, there's Six Sigma black belts, working on, other aspects of process improvement, just really across the organization. Launchpad is something, it's ongoing. I think even though maybe it was launched as this kind of initiative, implying it might have a beginning and an end, I think it's just going to become part of our culture now, where and I think most companies have to look at this is continuous improvement, right? Always trying to do it cheaper, better, faster. And so that's really what Launchpad is about.
All right. Thank you, Lon. You also mentioned that you have a monthly "What Can RPA Do for You" meeting or presentation.
Right.
What does that meeting kind of look like? Is that a Zoom meeting? Is it emails?
Well, we're a WebEx company, not a Zoom, but yeah, it's virtual. It's really pretty straightforward. It's the initial presentation is 15 or 20 minutes, where we just talk about the types of things that make a process a good automation candidate. Do you have structured data? Do you have high volume? Those types of things that make an automation straightforward to develop and return value quickly.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned you started out with 3 initial processes.
Right.
Could you give a brief overview of what each process involved?
Yeah. So in one area, we have a business unit called Investigator Services. So in any clinical trial, especially larger ones, you can have dozens of sites, each of which are serving dozens of patients. And so, shipping kits to those sites so they can collect the samples, and instructions about, how much blood that you need to collect at each visit. And there's a requisition that tells the people working at those sites all those specific instructions. Inevitably, when they'll have questions regarding, why are we collecting 3 blood samples, or they'll return the data and a key piece of patient information might be missing. And so these call center handles all those calls, and you don't want things to go on hold, right? Time is critical. And so there are these classifications of holds that are very manually intensive for the IS support people to deal with. And so some of these are fairly simply addressed. Birthdays missing, we can automate that, or we have administrative holds that can be automated. And so the call center person can just type a little hashtag code into the text, and the bot is perpetually searching that text to find those, and it will automatically generate a template, an email template, to send back to the appropriate site to say, hey, you left the birthday off for patient 17259. And then it monitors for a response email for that person. And if they get the response email, it's closed. If they don't get the response email in 48 hours, there are actually 3 follow-ups before the bot escalates it to a human being. So that's one of them. The other one, we refer to it as manual defines. There are, despite everybody's effort in QA, there are data revisions that need to be made. It goes through a process, and yes, this value needs to be changed from 3.4 to 3.5. And there's a Workfront developed workflow that the bot takes as input to gather up these data revisions, and then subsequently make those revisions in another system rather than a person typing on Workfront and manually entering those into the application. The third one was, it's similar, only it's related to samples and sample data. So as we collect samples, there's all kinds of information about a sample. Where is it stored? Has it been tested? There's a process called aliquoting, where a single sample is divided up into multiple samples for different tests. And all this information about the sample has to be recorded. We had contracted with an outside firm and basically paid on a per transaction basis for this outside firm to process all this sample related information. And so the third project was to develop a bot that would essentially eliminate the need for contracting with this outside organization to do this data entry work. So those were like the big 3 that we started with.
Okay, no, good stuff. So I think we have time for one more question. You had talked a little bit about growing into machine learning. Do you have any thoughts on how to access those various ML technologies that are available?
It's not something we've delved into deeply yet, right? So we do, we have an offshore development team that's working with some of that technology now. they've developed some stuff using open source technology. We do have one area where they've already implemented it in the patient safety area, which is, after a drug is kind of being out there and used post-approval, patients can go to a web form and enter information, side effects like I have a headache, or I think I had a fever or something like that. And we've got technology that kind of recognizes in those comments, for instance, if it sees headache, okay, that's normal, that's expected, that doesn't require an escalation to a human being. If I see heart palpitations or I see fainting, that might be a big red flag, and a human being needs to know about this report and follow up with the patient and the patient's doctor.
Okay. Well, Lon, I think we do have some time for some other questions here. Let's see, we have a few more that have come in. Were there things that surprised you when you started talking to managers and users trying to find new automations?
I guess, surprise would be whether or not I had the right expectations, right, going in. So I think one important aspect of this, if you're introducing this program for the first time, it is, one of the things that surprised me is some resistance to it. They saw this as potentially a threat to their job or something like that, where in reality, what we're looking for is to increase capacity. So while the net result might be we don't add headcount, right? But we weren't looking to eliminate headcount. And so if it's important from a change management perspective, I think, to get in front of that so that your potential bot users or people who will have an advantage because of the bots see it as a good thing and not as a threat.
Okay.
So I guess, I didn't think about that aspect. It surprised me when people are like, well, we don't, you could tell they were resistant because they were concerned about, as a manager, losing headcount when they knew they already had a lot of work to do, or as a user thinking I'm going to be replaced by this bot.
Right. Yeah, that change management issue is always there, that fear of that. You also talked a little bit about the gray areas between automation and IT. Mm-hmm. What do you think is the best way to approach IT so that they understand what you're doing on the business side, you're not stepping on each other's toes, kind of where that line between automation and IT is? Right.
Well, the way I present it, if most IT shops have all the work they can handle and then some. My sort of word to IT is we can help you. We can be, an automation can be a bridge decision or a bridge solution to something maybe more complicated that IT is going to do in the next year or two. Maybe they're going to build a complex middleware solution between two apps so they can freely exchange data. An automation can be a bridge to that by getting the information from one application to another until that sort of formal IT solution can be put in place. And there's a lot of examples like that where you can offload some stuff from IT to automation and kind of give them some breathing room. So I think if you present it as, we can help you, not we're this other thing that you have to worry about supporting, it helps.
Okay. So this will be the last question, Lon. Many mature RPA organizations, kind of hit a lull at some point when it's kind of hard to find some new automation candidates. What was your experience with this, and how did you at Labcorp overcome this?
So from my perspective, and I think in that original video I mentioned it, it's looking kind of laterally within the organization. So while this initial effort was focused on the central labs area, and as we work through that and maybe started, there's so much to do, but even approach exhausting opportunities, having other groups hear about it and getting finance involved, getting HR involved. And, I think in a lot of organizations that kick off RPA, that's probably where they start. But, in a big organization, there's no shortage, I think, of opportunities. It's more a factor of uncovering what they are, and getting them on your backlog so you can tackle them. And that's where getting the word out and coming up with creative ways to say, hey, we're here and we can help, is the best way to keep the opportunities coming.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Thanks to Lon and David, and thank you viewers for joining us for episode 3 of Driven 2021. Our random selection in our raffle has selected Chelsea Iverson as the winner of the Beats earphones, and congratulations. We'll be emailing you shortly on that. And finally, our next episode, not last, will be on Tuesday, October 26th, 11 a.m. U.S. Eastern Time. If you've not registered for Driven yet, make sure to do so. You don't want to miss out on our super cool conference t-shirts sent directly to your door, and registration will also send you a reminder to join our live stream. We look forward to seeing you here in 2 weeks. Thanks everybody for watching, and have a good rest of your day.